My fellow Americans, and that includes you liberals. Of course, all liberals are really communists. You know, they're not Machiavellian leaders, but they're communists. Okay, a few things I left off from my others. I would like you to go read a history of it's called Masada. It's in the Bible, but it's historiographically been true. It's just about 300 and some Jews that lived for years up on a mountaintop near outside of Israel. They just couldn't live. It wasn't a religious persecution because the Greeks allowed them to practice a religion how they wanted to. They just could not live with the crazy Machiavellian concepts that the Greeks had back then. Nothing's new. Nothing's new. A few things I missed. You know, I was talking about myself, and I forgot to say that I have two actual degrees and 5 equivalencies and master's degrees, and you know, almost 60 years of experiential knowledge. Basically, I'm a polymathic individual. That's part of the problem in your society. Is people are specialists in one area, and they're well educated and articulate, but they're not polymathic. You know, polymathic means you're educated in every area. Deeply educated in every area. And the people that run your country should be that way. Okay, let me get into this now. I know you think you have freedoms, and you know, I always love to hear Rush because he likes to fly, and I love to fly, and I know how he likes that and everything. And he thinks he still has freedoms. He doesn't. You know, they let him fly, but they can completely ground him, take his pilot's license away, take the certificates away from the aircraft. They can do anything they want. They already have almost complete control. They just don't implement it, and they will. They're going to implement it more and more. As you know, they're trying to take over the media and YouTube. God bless YouTube executives, by the way. They know why I'm saying that. But you have no freedoms. You can't get married. You can't die without paperwork. You can't give away money. You can't do anything without them controlling it. They actually control everything right now, and that's, you know, of course, that's your liberal or communistic philosophy. Another thing I missed is the trade deficits. I wrote an interesting story. I wrote to all 100 senators back in the early 70s when I saw this trade deficit going to pot. And I wrote them a big analogy, three-page letter showing them that, you know, thinking of a 55-gallon drum of water that you need, and it's completely being depleted all the time because the profits are going overseas and they're not coming back in, and how eventually the profits will go down and the nation will be nothing. I made him an interesting analogy that way, more detailed than that, of course, 3 pages. I got 33 letters back. This is, I think, in 1972 from senators, and they said, well, you have some validity to this, but you can't realize that the complications in doing something like this, if you had trade, I called it reciprocity. In other words, let's say Japan wants to send $1 million in, they have to buy $1 million. Or Korea wants to send $1 million worth of products, they have to buy $1 million of American products. And you see how the profits start evening out? It's very simple, actually. But they sent me letters back, and they all said one consistent thing. You don't understand that this would not have world peace, plus we could not dominate the world. We cannot control you, that philosophy. They all said that. They admitted it. And this is 1972, I believe, or 73, somewhere around there. I used to write a lot of letters in vain. It was righteous indignation. Okay. Let me address most things to you liberals/communists. You really don't understand one thing about your philosophy. Your philosophy is invalid. I've explained it in other tapes. It works on false prophecies. Your philosophy is, for the good of the all. There's a picture of Sarah Palin coming up right now. I really believe she believes in the good the individual makes for the good of the all, as well as Rush and Glenn and possibly Newt Gingrich and possibly Glenn Beck. Okay, let me tell you one very significant thing you can check out where you're missing the boat, all you liberals. And I'm speaking about the liberals are not really in power because they're beyond this. But part of their liberalism is absolute control in that same philosophy that I told you about. But you that sit out there and vote for them and that support them, they found a body, or the head and skeleton of they named her Lucy. She's 3.5 million years old. They found the skeleton about 10, 12 years ago. And the interesting thing is everything before that, the head size, the brain size was about 1/2. So all of a sudden the brain size doubled in 1/2. So let's say humanity began, whether you believe it religiously or whatever, about 3.5 million years ago. It's proof. It's just the fact, okay? There's a whole book on Lucy. Now, think about this. They were hunters and gatherers for 3.5 million years ago. We only started living in civilizations about 6,000 years ago, where there needed subjectivity, so there needed to be laws and regulations, and it proliferated to the point that it's at now. But for 3.5 million years, people, 3.5 million years, people lived in hunter and gatherer groups with very little laws and regulations. They made mistakes, okay? They made mistakes. They corrected. They evolved. It's a simple fact. You cannot argue with this. Religiously, maybe 3.5 million years ago, Adam was created. I don't know. It doesn't even matter. The fact is, for 3.5 million years, people lived within freedom. They had freedom. They had freedom of choice. They had freedom to do actions. They made a lot of mistakes. Now, what happens when you start taking away freedoms, which is part of human nature, people? Human nature. You're trying to defy human nature. People go crazy. They take drugs. They kill each other. They have more accidents. They form police actions. They do wars. They kill people. They just go insane. It's obnoxious to think that you can control people like this. That's your philosophy is so wrong. It's a false premise. You can't take people for 3.5 million years that have been free and start controlling them. They go nuts. Look at our population. Pick up the paper. Read about it. They go absolutely nuts in every perspective. They go power-hungry nuts. Egotistically, that's all the religious leaders. They form a legal system that write a simple law. They write 1,000 pages. They go nuts. Okay? And that's the problem with your premise of control and communism, and especially Machiavellian communism. Okay? There's some music on what it should be. You know what the philosophy should be? The philosophy should be, for the good of the individual makes for the good of the all. The good of the individual makes for the good of the all. That's the only philosophy that works, the only philosophy that evolves. Okay. I know you don't know this, but what I've just given you is absolute history. You can't argue about it. I'll tell you some other little things historiographically, okay? Aristotle once said, Aristotle, most of you know, I'm not going to tell you who he was. If you don't know who he was, you should study it. He said that the only benevolent leadership or government was benevolent dictators. But he said the problem, in the same sentence, he said the problem with that, they cannot maintain benevolence to maintain control. Think about that, liberals. Okay. More that you should know around this is that this insanity of trying to control people actually changes their brains, not just their actions, of course. And through the years, it's done that. Look at how, you know how this all started after the Second World War. The Hollywood humans were known communists. By the way, I also saw something I want to tell you about, and you should check on it. Glenn Beck did this thing of kind of the family political career of Obama, President Obama. And very intelligent. He hired some guy to do it, or he did it voluntarily, and it shows that the leaders, the people that Obama looked up to, were communists. There's no question about it. It's absolutely proof. So he's just manifesting this faster and faster. But don't forget, you liberals, that the Republicans are basically the same philosophy. They just believe in doing it slower and more regulated, with more benevolence to people and that. So if you ever come to your senses and read and study history, what you have to do is what I've been telling everybody else: vote these people out of office, petition them out of office, and don't buy their products. Every moment, every breath of your life should be dedicated to that if you want to save your lives, because you will be eaten up in this crazy philosophy too, believe me. Benevolence is not through control. You can't take human freedoms away. People go nuts. Pick up the paper, read about it. You cannot do it. You will devolute the people. They'll become animals, and eventually there'll probably be a nuclear war. You've got to stop right now, liberals. Think about it. 3.5 million years, people wandered the earth, hunters and gatherers. They had no laws, no free, but yet they still survived. They still evolved. Think about that. They evolved. You cannot evolve with communistic ideologies.